It's 5:45 p.m., which means it's time for BCTV's weekly media roundup. I'm tonight's host, Roland Boyd, and the show, 5:45 Live. Now on deck for tonight, the state faces off against the NRC over VY's decommissioning trust fund plans. The Select Board moves the NEA Our Town Community Arts Grant into the finalist phase with just 13 proposals left on the table. And we'll have plenty of construction updates with I-91 bridge detours, the continuation of the downtown sidewalk project, and much more. Plus, a robust community calendar coming up. All that and more in just 15 minutes, so stick with us right here on 5:45 Live. Welcome back to this August 21st, 2015 edition of 5:45 Live. That's a look at just some of the many offerings from the 2015 BCTV Summer Video Campers, as they did a slew of stop-motion narrative work, talk shows, special game shows, and much more. You can find it all at the Summer Camp Series section at brattleboro.tv.org, and we may even play a few more clips in there, depending on how much time we have. All right, with that, time to launch into the headlines, and for that, into the newsroom we go. This week, Brattleboro Landmark narrowly survived the DRB guillotine, as Brattleboro's Development Review Board this week overturned Town Zoning Administrator Brian Bannon's decision to have the 49-foot T sign at Panda North in Brattleboro taken down, after the Putney Road restaurant's owner applied for repairs to the sign that would total more than a third of the cost of the sign itself, a move that would void the sign's grandfather clause that has allowed it to remain even after the town's 1980s zoning law updates began limiting the height of business signs. Now, at a heated meeting Monday, the DRB entertained testimony from Bannon on his original ruling, heard from Panda North manager Catherine Chen and their attorney Bruce Hasselbeck, eventually offering up an initial ruling in favor of preserving the sign, though Panda North agreed to wait for a final decision from the board before beginning any work.
The zoning administrator's denial is now reversed, and just given the fact that this is before us, it's appropriate for us to determine whether the applicant may change the lettering and the color. We discussed both of those things in deliberative session and reviewed the applicable law offered by the appellant, and it concluded that both of those changes are acceptable under the present law.
Now, the quirky sign advertising T in bold block letters can be seen from 91, and some argue has become an unofficial historic landmark of sorts for the region. Built in 1966 to display the words steak, $5.99, it was later converted to T by removing the letters S and K from the beginning and end of the word steak, when the establishment was later converted from a steakhouse to a Chinese food restaurant, a sign that the town tried to have removed back then as well, before it was overturned by a judge in environmental court. Now, if you want to watch that full Development Review Board meeting with all the debate over the Panda North sign and much more, it's from the 17th. You can find it to stream in its entirety at brattleboro.tv.org, and it'll show all this coming week. 2 clicks up the dial on our government and education sister channel, Channel 10. All right, with that, time to move on in the stories here. Now, despite the mass popularity of cell phones, the infrastructure needed to make cell phone use practical in the region continues to be met with high levels of resistance, with communications giant AT&T walking away from multi-year tower construction plans in both Newfane and Putney in recent years after brutal blowback from community members concerned with the aesthetic implications of the proposed towers. Now, that was the backdrop as AT&T moves their tower expansion focus to Brattleboro, as the Select Board took a large percentage of this week's regularly scheduled meeting to debate the latest AT&T tower that would add an 140-foot structure to the skyline behind Agway at 1277 Putney Road, past the roundabout in North Brattleboro.
It's more that these impacts, when you don't have reliable service along the interstates, are more than just hypothetical. They are something that not just AT&T, but the whole state government gets complaints about from constituents at the legislative level, at the agency level, and was in fact what led to us originally bringing the cow onto the Brattleboro Development Corporation property, which is that when it's generally known that an area has poor cell service and it's unreliable, it dissuades people from going there in the first place.
Now, continuing the tradition of debate from previous towers, proponents of the structure argue the positive economic development impact of more nationally acceptable levels of broadband and the safety advantages of expanded cell phone coverage for a region with vulnerable landline infrastructure, as was revealed during Tropical Storm Irene, are all reasons to continue forward with these towers, while opponents of the structure continue to focus on the scenic impact. All right, we'll keep you abreast of how that goes with the latest AT&T tower proposal. But in the meantime, time to move on here. Now, the Select Board has been busy adding a special meeting last Thursday to supplement their regular schedule, in part to announce progress on selecting a winner of the $50,000 NEA Community Arts Our Town grant, revealing at last Thursday's special meeting that the selection committee had narrowed down the applications to 13 finalists and would be working toward picking a winner by this October.
Based both on the one additional week that we're taking at this stage of the process and on some additional thought as to how the flow can proceed best in September to final decisions and moving on into implementation, we've adjusted the schedule approximately 3 weeks on the far end for the final decision that you would make. It would be in early October to make a final determination of which project or projects to proceed with to implementation.
Now, for more on just how these 13 finalists were selected, we turn now to our Commons News report on the work of reporter Olga Peters, whose article entitled How the Screening Committee Chose the Project is the focus of our segment with Brattleboro's weekly independent newspaper. As this article includes comments from town manager Peter Elwell on just how difficult the selection process was given the scope of projects submitted, with Elwell telling Olga that, quote, "This was really challenging. Comparing the proposals wasn't even comparing apples to oranges, but apples and oranges and grapes and bananas." And as for how the finalists were chosen, Elwell alluded to the Brattleboro-centric nature of the mission of this project, adding that some of the proposals as beautiful pieces of art and exciting projects, but upon closer examination, they didn't reflect Brattleboro. So just a little look there if you want to check it out in its entirety. You can do what I just did on our split screen here and head to commonsnews.org and find that article. You can also pick up a newspaper. They refresh on newsstands each and every Wednesday all around town and are free, though it's worth noting that community-minded citizens can purchase a paid subscription to help keep the paper afloat. All right, time to move on in the headlines here. The state announced this week that they would be heading back to court to challenge the NRC after the agency approved an exemption to federal law, a move that allows Entergy to withdraw up to $225 million of the roughly $665 million in the plant's decommissioning fund, and use that $225 million for managing spent fuel at the plant, with the state's lawsuit filings alleging that, quote, "The commission acted arbitrarily, abused its discretion, and violated the Atomic Energy Act, the Administrative Procedure Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act in the approving of the exemptions, and failed to provide an opportunity for petitioners to participate in the process." The money in question will eventually come back to Entergy after they sue the Department of Energy, a common plant practice nationwide that stems from the lack of a national spent fuel repository, despite years of pay-in for development from every plant across the country, something Attorney General Bill Sorrell acknowledged when he was defending the state's new lawsuit, saying instead it was about what monies were used in the interim, making sure that the funds generated by Vermont ratepayers for decommissioning are not used to cover the Department of Energy's gaffes at the federal level, saying, quote, "They'll get it back from the federal government. It's just a question of whose money is going to be used in the interim and not earning returns." And it's worth noting, Entergy isn't named in the lawsuit at all, only the NRC, so the company hasn't announced any official response to the suit. But during an interview on the VY-produced program at BCTV entitled Safe Store Matters, hosted by Entergy Nuclear Vermont Yankee communications specialist Marty Cohn, VY Government Affairs Manager Joe Lynch did explain the whole interaction with the U.S. Department of Energy in greater detail, including outlining Entergy's plans to fund the initial cost for spent fuel management through private lines of credit, not through the use of decommissioning fund money, regardless of the NRC's ruling.
Entergy has taken on their own the initiative to get 2 credit agencies lined up totaling $145 million. And what we'll do is we will fund the the transition of the fuel from the wet spent fuel pool to dry cast fuel storage over the next 4 years by using those private funds. And then as soon as that work is done, we will be suing the Department of Energy, as just about every site that has a dry cast fuel storage facility is allowed to do. And the reason for that is all of the licensees, all of the owners of nuclear power stations in the country have a contract with the Department of Energy that dates back to the 1980s, where we've been putting money into a fund for the promise that the United States government would build a federal repository for spent nuclear fuel. Unfortunately, the government has not followed through on that obligation. They broke their contractual obligations to Entergy Vermont Yankee and others, so we're allowed to sue them for damages, and that being the cost of keeping fuel stored on the site.
More details on all things decommissioning can be found by checking out Safe Store Matters. There are now 5 episodes up, all about a half an hour with various members of the community and the staff at Entergy Vermont Yankee. You can find it at brattleboro.tv.org at the Safe Store Matters landing page just by searching Safe Store Matters in the search bar in the top right corner. All right, time to move on now here. More than $400,000 of the $1.6 million in EPA Brownsfield Assessment and Environmental Cleanup Grant dollars earmarked for the region are headed straight to Brattleboro, thanks in large part to the diligent grant application wizardry of Rod Francis and Sue Fillion in the town's Planning Services Department, an accomplishment amidst the often frenzied world of grant applications that EPA Regional Administrator Kurt Spalding made note of during a special presentation of the grant funds hosted earlier in the month on Depot Street in Brattleboro.
I'd like the Brattleboro team to come forward so we can take a picture around this $400,000 big check. It's the first Brownfields grant for Brattleboro. It will perform site assessments in the area I just walked, and it's important to note that the town of Brattleboro has been selected also to be a Smart Growth Implementation Assistance Grant.
You can see that full grant presentation. It runs about 25 minutes. The EPA Brownsfield Assessment Grant Cleanup Announcements from August 5th. It's at brattleboro.tv.org. All right, time to move on once more here on 545 Live. Lots of area construction updates to touch on as we prep you for the weekly I-91 Bridge Project Update segment. It includes a series of detours through downtown Brattleboro for all 91 traffic to accommodate blasting. The last in a detour trifecta scheduled for this coming Sunday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. That'll send traffic during that time through downtown Brattleboro. Route 30, Upper Dummerston Road, and the West River Trail all remain open, however. Now, for the very latest updates on everything bridge-related, visit the official website, I-91 Brattleboro Bridge, all one word, .com. All right, with that, it's time to move into our BCTV video calendar. This is all sponsored by the Brattleboro Savings and Loan, as their generous contributions to BCTV each year help fund a weekly look at area upcoming events. The calendar takes us to Townsend as this Saturday Valley Cares gets set for their annual concert fundraiser with outdoor performances in the Townsend Common from 4 to 6 p.m. tomorrow. That's Saturday, with an impressive lineup of area musicians including Hungry Town, the Bonneville Boys, Gene Morrison, Kathy Martin, Ralph Sherman and Friends, and the Tuesday Night Town Hall Boys. All proceeds benefit Valley Cares. Now, for more on the area organization and its mission, we turn to our calendar video spotlight of the week, and this Valley Cares PSA produced by BCTV producer Janice Hall.
A lot of people think of Valley Cares as assisted living, but we are much more than that. For seniors who want to live independently, we have apartments here at West River Valley Senior Housing with full kitchens and large adaptable bathrooms. If people think ahead about the changes that come with age, they will be able to transition more successfully rather than waiting until a crisis when choices are limited.
All right, that does it for another edition of 545 Live. Thanks for checking in with us here. We'll be sure to see you next week right here on BCTV Comcast Cable Channel 8 at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, thanks for watching.